days of moon.
We have an unidentified flying object.
Nine two three 1713. Now, right before we went to break, Mr. Reed, you were talking about this amazing experience that your whole family experienced. I wanted to throw in a couple comments there before I ask you both a question on this. When you said you heard your mother's voice, a lot of people report something like that. As a matter of fact, Stan Romanek, when he was on our show, and he wrote about this in his book as well, he recorded that when a crack came, he was able to record on his microphone that his stepson's voice calling mom, mom, as if to get his wife out of bed. But it turned out it wasn't his son, his stepson. It was an electronic voice that they were used possibly to lure him or his wife out of bed. So I just thought that was another thing that is very regular to a lot of these cases. Am I not correct, Ms. Smith?
I'm sorry, say that again. You're talking about the partner that...
yeah, that a lot of times these visitors use the voices of a family member to lure people out of their bed, right?
At times, yeah, there seems to be some deception in some ways. In fact, I had a couple of people that I was regressing, and, you know, they can make a person see something or someone that's really not there, but we call it a screen memory, to perhaps calm the person down or, you know, make it easier for the person to agree to go with the abductors. But one of my clients said that she saw her, they were coming into her house, the aliens, and she said, "Oh my God, I see my mother," and her mother had been dead for several years. And then she realized that, you know, of course it wasn't her mother, it was them placing that image in her mind, and it made her extremely upset. She used a term that I can't use on the air, but it's in her regression tape. And, you know, I can understand her anger towards them.
And what they basically do is they reach into our memories and use that to, like you said, create a screen memory to, in essence, calm us down to kind of submit, right? And other times people also say that when they're traumatized, that the ETs either do something or tell them something, and they're instantly calm. Did you experience something like that, Mr. Reed?
To be honest with you, no. I mean, what happened to us, and I'm just going to give you the facts, and I'll tell you why I stand by what I say. Our vehicle had magnetic fields around it that was so strong that they spun a compass from 2 feet away. This is not me telling you this. This is law enforcement. This is witnesses. These are people that investigated it. Even Robert Bigelow's team came out, or a funded team through him came out, and Officer Detective White, and Debbie Cobble, who the book Intruders was written about, she actually filmed it as well. And there were radiation readings on the vehicle. So this was what hit us was very mechanical. It was very, it created a lot of problems, not just for the car, but for my brother's head. You know, he had a lot of effects from it. We believe that these low-frequency ELF actually, because your mind works on electrical pulse, so we believe that that's what actually got him into this funk where he was not sure or felt himself and was disoriented. And so we believe that there's an ELF, or low-frequency magnetic field, that comes over people. And we say that because it happened to us. I'm not saying what happened to us happens to everybody. I think, you know, we're all trying to make sense out of what happened. So the only thing that we've got to go on are the facts. And to me, that speaks loudly for what happened to us. And it certainly holds true when you look at HAARP and the different testing they're doing with magnetic fields today. They can calm people. They can make people unhappy, go into a coma. You can put people to sleep. You can control people through low-frequency ELF. So we think that's what happened. So when I look at what I saw in this willow tree and this body of water, that was actually shown to me, but it was shown to me on a screen. It wasn't a screen memory. It was shown to me on a large back wall of what what would look to be part of a craft. It went from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock. It was about 15 feet high. It was huge, and we had a black and white TV back then, so this thing was quite amazing in a lot of respects. So maybe we all see things differently. Maybe we take things, or take from it what we will. Maybe to some who are under some type of, or their head is being manipulated, or under some type of influence, might think that's a screen memory when they're actually seeing something real. Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe it was a screen memory for me, and I think it was actually there. I don't know. But I can say that for me and my brother, and that what we saw was very mechanical. It was very, knock on wood type of thing. So I'm not saying that everybody's, obviously, I think we all have or share different experiences, and we take from it, what we will, and our mind tries to tell us what happened, and our gut tries to tell us something else. But at the end of the day, all you have to do is go by the facts, and the facts said, hey, you've got magnetic energy on your car, you've got radiation on your car, your brother's now bald, you guys have had health problems, the car was permanently damaged, and this is what we saw. And so that's what we take from it.
One thing I love about your case is, like you mentioned with the witnesses, there are so many, everybody from officers, polygraph experts. You had some that testified on your behalf that said you were not lying on your polygraph test. You had one thing that I love, which we could hopefully talk about right now. Off air, we were speaking about that during one of these experiences you had, witnesses, neighbors claimed to have seen craft landing right in your land, right?
Yeah, there was 30 to 50 people at the Egremont Country Club back in the 1960s. That club is only 7 miles from our home, and it's still there today, actually. And Hynek had actually issued the case from Jug End Resort. I think it was a CE2 classification in a Bailey rating. And as it turns out, when Attorney Robert Bleckman was looking into our case, that was one of the cases that he used to reference our accounts. So my mother we had this 80 acres of property, and 7 miles away from us was not that far, and they actually saw this craft actually dip down, which would have placed it pretty much right over our property, give or take a few miles. So we really do believe that was the craft that landed on our property, and being that it was, and also in Hampton, Mass, 35 miles away, there was another sighting. So these are both in September, both when it happened with us. So in retrospect, that was really what drove Robert Bleckman to actually pursue our case, and how it kind of snowballed from there. So, and we've got the polygraph examiner actually went on an interview actually with a friend of Bond's just a couple of weeks ago, and gave a statement to the test and the questions that were asked of me, and what year and how I passed and what the score was and that sort of thing. So he's been, I think, one of the questions he was asked by Lori Wagner, if I can use her name, was, did anything anything I said or our case persuade him in any way to change his opinion on the phenomenon? Because at one point,
because these are the people that are actually having contact with them. If we're going to get any knowledge of what these beings are like, their intentions, how they interact, what their society's like, these are the people we're going to hear it from. And that's why I think it's so great. And another comment that I've gotten from several researchers right here on the show is that when people are observing a UFO, an extraterrestrial craft, it's either coming to Earth from another dimension or another plane or another planet to pick up somebody, or they're on their way from dropping them off from an abduction, if you want to call it that. Some people don't like to use that word, as you know. Other people prefer experience, others prefer contact, but nonetheless, and I think that makes sense because clearly this is a huge operation. The last Roper poll was, 4 or 2% of Americans, of up to 4 million people in America alone, have been subject to this? Isn't that what
it was? Turned out to be 1 in 50 American adults, and that's quite a bit of people, quite a few. If you think about the number, is staggering, but it's very true that they are here, and people see them because they are they have their own agenda, is what I want to say. We don't know what it is yet, and it's probably very true that when they are seen there, they were just abducting people, bringing them back, or they have somebody on the craft. I mean, the operation that went on Coronado Island in 1994, they describe a very large craft. I mean, a huge, like a mothership type craft that, we see in the movies. And a couple of the abductees commented that, gee, I've never seen a craft like this or this big. And I just got the impression very, very strongly that they used this size craft because they knew that they were going to be abducting several people from that island that weekend.
This craft in 1969 was so big, my grandmother referred to it over the past maybe 10 years ago as reminding her today as a flying strip mall. I mean, this thing was absolutely immense.
I've heard that expression before, Tom, a flying mall. Yep,
yeah.
absolutely.
And what I think so interesting and why I really applaud Mario for calling in is our case was actually mentioned on WSBS radio in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. Mario, who I've never even met, but have spoken to him on the phone, he was only miles from our home. And you had Jug Inn Resort, who had seen the craft. You had Hampton, Massachusetts, that also was given a CE 3, I think, which, again, was in September. You've got several other people in town that have contacted me since. You've got all these kids and parents and relatives of them and have stayed in touch with us that drew these things on the back wall of our classroom. I spoke to Tammy Blackwell, who's the head of the City Hall there, and even she knows people that have referenced and talked about the accounts back in Sheffield. So I'm glad they're finally starting to come out, which I hope that I was able to help that a little bit or give it a push. But it's such a small little town. I think everyone is really still nervous in some respects to talk more about it because it's still a very quiet, conservative little town even today.
Mr. Friedman, two things. Mr. Friedman says that a lot of the vehicles that are picking up people or just coming to the Earth are the small Earth excursion vehicles, as to use his term, whereas they're taking people and putting them on their larger ships, which are parked probably right outside our orbit, maybe on the darker side of the moon where we can't see them. And the other thing, I just read another lecture by Jim Maroney, if I'm not mistaken, who was a truck driver, is a truck driver, and says when he was taken, his entire truck was taken into the ship. So that's
also very common.
In 1969, the original report that my mother gave said that our car was facing in the opposite direction. Now, I certainly wouldn't remember that, but she did, and she said that because of where the store was that my grandmother walked into. That's actually on a police report, I believe. She really believes that the car was faced in the opposite direction. I used to think, well, maybe she was disoriented because of what happened, but she swears by it. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Ron, you might be able to back me up on it or comment on this. I think the Betty and Barney Hill case, their car was in the wrong direction. I think Kathleen said something about that to me once, maybe a year ago or so.
It may have been in the wrong direction, but I know it was several miles down the road.
Okay.
And they discovered later they were missing some time.
Mario, but were you an experiencer as well, or you witnessed a craft in the area?
We're talking about big crafts. The craft that my family saw, it was myself, my sister, my father, and my mother. This thing was about 1,000 feet wide. Now, this same craft was seen 20 years later in 1987 over the Waterbury, Connecticut area, and it was actually a state policeman that took the picture. If you go to MUFON, Connecticut, and you click on the temporal doorway, you will see the exact same type craft that my family saw. There's over 5,000 people saw that craft as it passed over the I-84 in Waterbury, Connecticut. It was only 100 miles away from where we saw our craft almost 20 years earlier. The same exact UFO.
Was it a disc, triangle, V?
It was a disc, and it had revolving, circular, bright colored lights amidships. red, yellow, green, and white, and blue. There was 5 colors, and they were going in a clockwise motion, like a almost like a, I can't really explain it, but it was like they were sweltering around in a circle, but going really fast, but like so fast that, you know, you see something moving, but it's moving so fast that it almost moves slow inside of itself. That's how these lights were circulating. It was.
I'll tell you something. When we saw this thing in '69 too, which I think was actually about 6 months after what you saw, this thing, our family reporting, if you will, it looked like flashes, like searchlights in the woods. It was like, but flickering. And we used to think that because our car was moving, you know, you see the light and a tree gets in the way and it looks like it flickers. But the more and more we thought about it, it was these lights were, it almost looked like searchlights that were like coming on, coming off, coming on, coming off. And that's what got our attention. And this was up on the top of a hill off of Route 7, I believe. And it was a hill, and there were some trees, and it was up above us, so we couldn't really see it. So the whole forest looked like it lit up with these quick, flashing, like almost like spotlights, Just boom, 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 boom. And at one point you thought, okay, was there an army of flashlights in there? But that's what it looked like. And because we were moving, also, it looked like, okay, are we seeing it flicker because of the trees and stuff? But no, I think this whole, and they were a blue-white light, very blue, very intense, very bright. And so, yeah, again, that was very similar to what all of us saw. We got
That's awesome.
You know, we're going to come on a short break in the next minute or so, and I know we're going to be carrying this over into the next hour before Mr. Weatherly joins us. And I know, like we say in off-air, there is so much information that we can have all of you on for hundreds, if not thousands of hours, and there would still be so much more to talk about. That's why I think this is such an important topic. But before we go on to the break, Tom, have you seen different types, different shapes of craft aside from the different sizes? And Mario and Yvonne, I wanted to ask if you could also tell us about your cases. Or everybody hold that thought, and when we pick it back up, we're going to continue on this, and we're going to majority of this hours talking about. But before we went to break, we were just about to talk about the different kinds of craft from Thomas Reed and his remarkable experiences, which have several witnesses, everybody from police officers to polygraph experts that came forward to neighbors that have seen the craft. And Mr. Reed, what impression did you get of their agenda? Why have they been taking you and your family?
Well, I believe that if you look at the wounds that were on my brother's chest, that was recently, again, just looked at by his doctor, and the 2 puncture wounds behind his right ear. The marks behind his ear and the marks on his chest kind of line up with a side of the thymus gland, which produces the T cells for the body's immune system. And if you go by what my brother and I feel or believe, and my family, we believe that there was something extracted, that there was something of need from us. And of course, you know, we are all Rh negative. There's been a lot of attention on that part of it, you know, that a lot of people believe that there could be a connection there. And I'm not ruling it out, because there's actually 9 of us that are Rh negative, and that's a high number within one household. So that there could be something to that. The other thing, we live near, not far from Pratt & Whitney and Command Aerospace and Electric Boat, you know, within an hour and a half. So there was an awful lot of the military-type manufacturing facilities there. And, of course, Electric Boat made nuclear submarines, so that wasn't far. And then, of course, we had this area that was very secluded. So if you wanted to hide, let's say, that would have made a good spot to do so, and as there wasn't that much around there. So we might have been at the wrong place at the wrong time. But again, my mother experienced something in 1954 in Moosehead Lake in Maine with her girlfriend. So there was a connection with her. So if you looked at it from a scientific standpoint, or at least when you start looking for, you got to look for patterns, I guess. And the pattern is that my mother had an experience with someone that she was with, and then, of course, my brother and I. And so if there is something of interest with us, what could it possibly be? And if you look at the wounds in the chest and the marks behind the ear, you know, something was taken, something was physically extracted, or something was mutually returned. And if you look at that part of it and you say, okay, well, maybe something was given back and extracted, maybe there was something mutual with this, whatever this was, then you can look at my son, who Yvonne has met, and who is extremely intelligent. He was doing 13th in 4th grade. He was doing grade 13 math. He was in the 127th percentile and way above the gifted. He was in the superior range. There is something happening with my son. He definitely has he tests higher than coincidental chance, which is how he adopted the nickname Chance. So there is something going on with him. Whether it has anything to do with this, I certainly can't attest to that. I don't have a way to measure that, except that no one else in our family has this sense that he does. But here's something else. He was actually evaluated at the Miami Children's Hospital. He was evaluated with the Hoffman test in the school. He was in an academy, which is actually almost an early college, when he was in 10th grade. And he was evaluated by Michael Buckner, a third-party a director of a facility here in Knoxville, and he actually put something in writing that my son actually showed signs of remote viewing. So this is actually documented. So to answer your question, it's definitely genetically driven. As far as what happened with us, I can't state that's what happens to other people. Our family's connection to this is genetically driven. For whatever reason, maybe, I certainly believe that man was originally Rh negative. I do believe that. I stand by that. I don't think we're an offspring of a monkey. Man was originally Rh negative. O negative, A negative, I don't know, but definitely Rh negative. I believe that. And I believe that if there is a connection, or those who more frequently have experiences are Rh negative, I believe what's happening is these entities are going back to the root of man, maybe to perfect it. Maybe we didn't develop the way we were supposed to. Perhaps there are receptors that aren't working like we should. We have these huge brains. We're not using them. Perhaps it's something like that. Maybe they're trying to perfect something. I don't think it's really for our benefit. Maybe there's a little bit being trickled down to maybe save a very barbaric race in general with respect to an awful lot of what's happening lately. But at the same time, they perfect something for themselves somewhere else. But that's really what I think it is. You look at the amount of catastrophic, we've had 5 extinctions, and yet we have close to 2 million species of animals flourishing here. I mean, they would have all had to have been couples around the same age, same area to have offspring. You're talking an awful lot of insects and bugs and fish and plants and whatever to, animals and to all live and flourish in the right areas at the right time. And it just seems very planned to me. And so that's my viewpoint. This is a planned planet that was here to flourish and to be plucked when needed.
A lot of the researchers have come to similar conclusions that this is the largest laboratory that we were actually created. Dr. Lear recently on air here spoke about Homo noeticus, where Homo sapien may be being transformed into that with another genetic manipulation. And I guess this will lead into and all the experiencers / abductees who say that when if it's women, their ova are taken, men whose sperm are taken, months later, if the women are pregnant, their fetuses are removed, and then when they're taken back on craft, they are shown these hybrid babies with these large eyes and large heads. And I wanted to ask you, Mr. Reed, if you've ever seen anything like that on board. And the third thing I want to let everybody know, Preston Dennett has just joined us. I know, Yvonne, you know him. Thomas
yes.
Reed,
Hi, Preston.
Hi, Yvonne.
Thomas, you know him. Mr. Weatherly, you know him.
No, I don't believe I've had the pleasure to meet him, no.
Oh, he goes
I have
way
not
back,
met him either.
Yvonne, and ufology as general. He's been researching for, 26 years, 27 years, Preston, author of 17 books, and he wrote a book about the Coronado incident, which we were talking about last hour.
Yes.
Yeah, I know exactly who Preston is, but we haven't had the pleasure of meeting him.
Oh, he did with Mike Evans, who's one of the abductees who was taken that weekend. He's also, of course, a chapter in my book that I go into with all the other people that were abducted that entire weekend. So glad to talk to you again, Preston.
Yeah, me too. And nice to meet you guys.
Nice to meet you.
Real quick,
You had a
Mr.
question
Reed.
for me, correct?
Yeah, Mr. Reed, have you seen anything of the black-eyed children on the ships? And it'd be a three-way question, because I know Preston has a question after this, and Mr. Weatherly, I wanted to ask you, do you think these indigo children or the black-eyed children grow up to be the men in black? And so let's start with Mr. Reed. Have you ever seen something similar?
I can't say that I've actually seen what they refer to as a black-eyed child, although I've heard about them for years. And I can't even say that I've really seen what looked like children. What we saw looked more like a genetic experiment. But I can tell you quickly before I go, though, that I did have my regression with Yvonne last week. And one of the things that came out from that I hadn't consciously remembered was I actually, for the very first time, realized how I felt. And if you're interested in that, I'd like to share that with you. I actually remembered and I reacted to the pain that I felt. And it was the very first time I've actually been in touch with that. Although I remember the room and I remember what took place, but I actually felt it as if it was happening to me right then and there. And it made me realize that there is a lot more that I don't remember. But so to really answer your question, I don't recall seeing that, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't more there that I wasn't consciously aware of.
You know, we're coming down to the last minute. I just want to join it.
We have an unidentified flying object.
Third base of moon.